Okay, well, welcome everybody again to Pastor Class, and we are continuing our look. Last week we looked again at the Synoptic Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and then also we included John and saw how they're all telling the same story, but they might order things differently. And in our culture today, historians wouldn't do that, but these guys weren't writing as historians trying to record a particular order necessarily. They were more focused on organizing their material to present into certain points. And so one of the things that we do when we look through the scriptures is to try to see, okay, what is the point that Matthew is trying to make here in this passage, and does how he organized the material help to further the point that he was making? Or was Matthew just telling us this that happened now because that's when it happened? And so we don't know, and we don't have, they didn't say, hey, this is exactly how it happened. Luke may have been the closest in kind of saying at the beginning of Luke, he said to Theophilus, I've tried to write an orderly account of the things that have happened. And so when we see that, we go, well, okay, this looks as if Luke kind of has the is hoping to give us a more play-by-play historical, but then there's some clues in Luke. And last week we saw how Luke also said, you know, Jesus taught for a number of days. And so we don't know exactly the order of the things. And he said this right at the beginning of Holy Week. So now what I'd like to do is really go to the night of Jesus' arrest and take a look at the arrest of Jesus, and then move forward there. And then next week we'll all come back and get to maybe as homework we'll have everybody come back and tell me what day you think the night Jesus was betrayed happened on, and which day you think Jesus was crucified on, and we'll have a little bit of fun kind of talking about that during the week that we celebrate for Holy Week. So let's take a look. Let's start in John, and I'm going to go ahead and go to chapter 12 here. I'll share my screen again. And there we go. And so in John chapter 12, we see the triumphal entry. We see the Greeks sought out Jesus. We see that the Son of Man Jesus said the Son of Man has to be lifted up, and there is this phrase here, Father, save me from this hour. Jesus is saying, look, what should I say? Save me from this hour, Father? No, but it's for this very purpose. I've come to this hour. And so we see this phrasing of hour that John uses. We see similar language that Mark is going to start to talk about the hour. Mark has kind of gone from locations, and now we get to the Holy Week. He talked about the days. Mark talked about the number of days before the Passover, and then now we're going to draw near to the hour of Jesus' crucifixion. So we have the Son of Man, Jesus talking about the Son of Man being lifted up. This is his teaching. Again, we looked at this last week, but we looked at it just very briefly. We saw the unbelief of the people, and again, he's been telling them all these things, but they've been sort of blinded to the truth. And then Jesus again declares why he came. He came to save the world, and so now we get to, in John 13, probably gives us maybe the most intimate description of the night Jesus was betrayed, and so let's take a look at and just kind of read through this together. Would somebody read verses 1 through 11 for us of John 13?
Now before the feast of the Passover, when Jesus knew that his hour had come to depart out of this world to the Father, having loved his own who were in the world, he loved them to the end. During supper, when the devil had already put it into the heart of Judas Iscariot, Simon's son, to betray him, Jesus, knowing that the Father had given all things into his hands, and that he had come from God and was going back to God, rose from supper. He laid aside his outer garments, and taking a towel, tied it around his waist. Then he poured water into a basin and began to wash the disciples' feet and to wipe them with a towel that was wrapped around him. He came to Simon Peter, who said to him, "Lord, do you wash my feet?" Jesus answered him, "What I am doing you do not understand now, but afterward you will understand." Peter said to him, "You shall never wash my feet." Jesus answered him, "If I do not wash you, you have no share with me." Simon Peter said to him, "Lord, not my feet only, but also my hands and my head." Jesus said to him, "The one who has bathed does not need to wash except for his feet, but is completely clean. And you are clean, but not every one of you." For he knew who was to betray him. That was why he said, "Not all of you are clean."
Okay, very good. We get some clues here as to when this is occurring. So what are some of those clues that we can see here?
During the feast of the Passover.
Okay, not just during, but it says even before the feast of the Passover. So that's kind of an interesting. So it has to be before Nisan 15, right? It's, or at least before they would eat the dinner. Okay, what else do we have?
During supper.
Okay, so what time would that sort of suggest that this is?
The evening.
Okay, yeah. So now when we say before the feast of the Passover, and then we say in the next verse during supper, there's a couple things. This might be a day before. This might be just minutes before. So just before, we're still not certain yet. But if we were to say, we might say, hey, we think this kind of all happened maybe on the same timeline in the same evening. And so this maybe gives us a clue to what day of the week, but maybe not. It may just be that this is just all kind of connected, and the ESV translation has placed it all kind of together here. But Jesus knows that his time has come. He knows he's going to be betrayed. And it's even interesting here that the devil had already put it into the heart of Judas, Simon's son, Judas Iscariot, to betray him. And so that's kind of interesting. Like, his heart is sort of already hardened, and yet Jesus is going to go through a little bit of this evening with him. So let's maybe take note of where John places these guys at the supper. Kind of interesting. So definitely we have some clues here. And now we get into this. Maybe you guys have done some foot washing ceremonies, foot washing times at Bethany. I don't know. I don't believe we've had one since I've been here. But how many of you guys have ever been a part of the foot washing, foot cleansing service? It's a pretty intimate. It's a pretty intimate service. I think some year, probably not a COVID year, but some year we may want to have a foot washing time. But why do you think they would have been doing a foot washing? Any guesses?
Well, for
Well,
practical
they walked
reasons,
they walked around in sandals in rather dirty territory.
Okay, right, yeah. So you've got the disciples traveling all over the place, and do we know kind of where they've been before this? Does anybody remember where they've kind of been before we get to this point?
I think they've been to Bethany.
Okay, yep, they've been basically walking back and forth to Bethany. They were staying in Bethany, and then they would kind of go back and forth. We do know that that Jesus has asked the disciples to basically make arrangements for them in the city, and there's sort of I've been to the room. It said that this is where it took place, this upper room, right? And it's kind of interesting. I believe that the room that people believe that this supper took place in was actually in the Greek quarter, which then makes sense because remember, we just said that we saw some Greeks seek Jesus. And so there may be some clues here as to that's the case, but again, it happened so long ago, we don't actually know the exact spots, but there's sort of traditions passed down of these might be the spots. So let me continue just to read here in verse 12. It says, when he had washed their feet and put on his outer garments and resumed his place, he said to them, do you understand what I have done to you? You call me teacher and Lord, and you are right, for so I am. If I then, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you also ought to wash one another's feet. For I have given you an example that you also should do it just as I have done to you. Truly, truly, I say to you, a servant is not greater than his master, nor is a messenger greater than the one who sent him. If you know these things, blessed are you if you do them. I'm not speaking of all of you. I know whom I have chosen. But the scripture will be fulfilled. He who ate my bread has lifted his heel against me. I am telling you this now before it takes place, that when it does take place, you may believe that I am he. Truly, truly, I say to you, whoever receives the one I send receives me, and whoever receives me receives the one who sent me. And so why does Jesus say he has washed the disciples' feet?
It's an example of how they should react, how they should be doing things with one another and with the people around them.
Right. So Jesus basically has said that he's come as a servant to serve everyone, to save everyone. He knows the hour has come, and now he encourages his disciples to serve others as he has served. So yes, there were some very practical things, but really the lowest, whoever was in the lowest position of the house would have been responsible for washing the feet. And here's Jesus, the greatest, coming to wash his disciples' feet. And so he sets an example of humility, of service, and I find that just fascinating. And I could preach a whole sermon just on that. But we'll continue here. Jesus, after saying these things, it says that he was troubled in spirit and testified, saying, truly, truly, I say to you, one of you will betray me. And so they're getting ready to find out who the betrayer is. The disciples looked at one another, uncertain of whom he spoke. One of his disciples, whom Jesus loved, was reclining at table at Jesus' side. We could actually do a Bible study on where were the disciples sitting in the room, and probably Peter was in the last position. He was probably in the last position because he was the one who Jesus came to at the end. It sort of suggests he came to Simon Peter, and then after this interaction, then Jesus then puts on his outer garments and resumed his place. And so they would sort of sit in like a big C, sort of like this. And then the teacher got up and probably, well, the picture of the Lord's Supper that we've all seen, the painting, is probably not accurate. He would have sat way to one end, and we know that he sat basically between the disciple whom Jesus loved, which is John. and Judas Iscariot, because they were basically dipping their bread into the same dish. And so likely Judas may have been sitting in the greatest position, and yet he ends up becoming the least. It's kind of interesting. And Peter, in the lowest position, ends up becoming really one of the great disciples. Kind of interesting there. So Jesus says, "Look, it's to him who I give this morsel of bread when I've dipped it," and he gives it to Judas, the son of Simon Iscariot. And so after he had taken the morsel, it says Satan entered into him, and Jesus said to him, "What you are going to do quickly." No one at the table knew why he said this to him. Some thought that because Judas had the money bag, Jesus was telling him, "Buy what you need for the feast," or that he should give something to the poor. So after receiving the morsel of bread, he immediately went out, and it was night. Kind of fascinating here that Judas gets to be a part of the feast and has the bread, but he does not partake of the wine, which is kind of interesting just to note. So now then in verse 31, we have Judas going out. Jesus teaching again with his disciples. Jesus foretells Peter's denials, and then we can go to the next chapter, and he's still teaching. Jesus promises the Holy Spirit. He's still teaching all of John 14. John 15, he continues to teach, talking about the hatred of the world, and then teaches about the work of the Holy Spirit. Your sorrow will turn to joy, and I have overcome the world. And then we're going to get into John 17. This is the high priestly prayer. It's often referred to as the high priestly prayer, Jesus praying for his disciples. And then we come to the betrayal and arrest of Jesus in John chapter 18. And so let's take note of where he is. When Jesus had spoken these words, he went out with his disciples across the brook Kidron, the Kidron Valley. Does everybody know where that is in terms of Jerusalem? I'll get a images. Okay. So here is sort of a very basic picture of the topography of Jerusalem and the city of David here. So down here would be where you had the oh, Paul, help me out. What's at the south of Jerusalem, where they washed?
The cheesemaker, the Traponian Valley.
Well, the Cheesemakers Valley. I'm just trying to think of the water place where the guy's healed at. Hang on, maybe I'll get a different image here and it will share this with you.
Did you mean the Pool of Bethsaida?
Okay, so the Pool of Bethsaida would actually be at the other side, but the other pool, what's the other one's called?
Siloam.
Is that? I think that's the one down at the bottom here.
Yeah, that's the one connected with the siege in the Old Testament.
Okay, let me open this here.
And I think Hezekiah's tunnel. So whatever.
Yeah. So if I pull this over, here we go. Okay, so well, this is all in German, but that's all right. So you can see here, this would be where the temple was. This is the Temple Mount today. It goes up to here. You have the Pool of Bethsaida up here, and the pool of the Siloam down here. The Kidron Valley, there is a Gihon Spring is somewhere in here, and there's actually a tunnel that winds through here and ends up basically down at the pool of Siloam. And so, but it was basically, they dug this tunnel underground in order that they could have water during the siege. But you can see here this valley, this Kidron Valley, and it's quite a bit lower than the Temple Mount area. There's got to be a better picture here.
Yeah, that's there were huge staircases for people to ascend the Temple Mount there.
Okay, this is from the model. There's a model in Jerusalem, and that you can kind of see where stuff was. But David's palace is up here, and what's remarkable is they've actually found what they think is David's palace. It was under a parking lot, and really remarkable stuff now that they've discovered, and just really, really cool. Hopefully I can take you all there with me and we can go check it out in person ourselves. But this Kidron Valley, it's a very deep valley that ran alongside, and this is probably where Abraham would have walked through here, and I think that Abraham actually meets with the high priest Melchizedek down in this valley here, and worship the Lord there. But here's where the temple is. The Temple Mount is all the way up here, and so you can just see like it's much lower. And so Jesus is somewhere over in this area over here, in one of these like houses, and then it says they crossed over the Kidron Valley. So they would have gone down across the valley, and that is where Gethsemane is. And here, let me show you again another picture. Open image in tab. So here again, you can see just the gradient of the earth, of the ground there. It's quite a way. So it's a pretty good natural defense as the town. Oh, here's an even better one. Although it's not as big here. So you have the temple up here, the Kidron Valley. How many of you guys have seen Monty Python?
Mhm.
So one of my favorite lines is when they're doing the Sermon on the Mount, and in Monty Python they have Jesus saying, "Blessed are the cheesemakers," and one of the guys goes, "Oh, blessed are the cheesemakers. That's great. They've had one heck of a time," and it just always makes me laugh. But there was this valley here on the other side of the temple, sort of known as the Cheesemakers Valley here, and then you have the Hinnom Valley, which would have come along here. And so Jerusalem, ancient Jerusalem, used to basically only be the Temple Mount area at the top of Mount Moriah, and then this area down here at the bottom known as the City of David. And then this area was known as the Ophel, sort of in between the areas. And then the Mount of Olives is over here. So this is all cemetery now. And you would have a bunch of olive trees, and there would have been olive presses. And so this is where Jesus has crossed over from somewhere in the south of the city over here now to the Mount of Olives. So he had to basically go by the temple, go down into the valley, and then back up again. And so now he's in that direction. Just for record, if you were to continue to go up this Mount of Olives all the way up to the top and then go this direction, about over here is where Bethany is, and Bethphage is somewhere in here, I believe. And so this is kind of the area that Jesus was going back and forth, maybe about 3 or 4 miles a day, Their feet are dirty. They've got dust, caking on their feet. And Jesus stoops down to the lowest position and washes their feet, but maybe just a little bit. So that's where they're at. And it says, where there was a garden, which he and his disciples entered. And Judas, who betrayed him, also knew the place, for Jesus often met there with his disciples. And so that's where Judas comes. What do you think the timing of this is? It still seems like it's sort of the same night, doesn't it? Like there hasn't been another night, and actually, because Jesus even predicted the betrayal of Peter before the rooster crows, we know that this is all of this has happened in John, from John 13 all the way to John 18, is all happening in the same night. And so we can take a look. Then Jesus is then taken to Caiaphas, who was or Annas, who was the father. He was the father-in-law of Caiaphas, who was the high priest, and then we see Peter's denial. We see the high priest questions Jesus, and Peter denies Jesus again, and the rooster crows. So basically, everything in John 18 takes us to the sunrise of the night Jesus is betrayed. So John 13 to the end of really right here, we have the rooster crowing. So this is the beginning of the day, and this is where some people have a hard time thinking that, man, there seems to be a lot of stuff that happens. Like Jesus goes and's with the high priest. He's up all night, and then he's before Pilate, and then he at one point he goes before Herod, and he comes back to Pilate. And there's just a lot going on. And so some will argue, and I believe those who take the position of a Thursday crucifixion will take the position that there was really just too much going on here, and they would have had to have paused for 24 hours in order to for him to be judged appropriately before he could be crucified. So some contextual stuff of this may have happened all in the morning that Jesus is killed, but there is quite a bit, and so some have argued that no, we think that there had to have been more time, and so the argument has been that there was a policy that you couldn't just crucify him the same day you charged him, and so there may have been a 24-hour period. We don't get any of those clues though. John just sort of tells the story of they led him to he's questioned by the high priest. He's led to Caiaphas. He's questioned by the high priest. He goes before Pilate. Pilate sends him out, and Jesus just has a conversation with Pilate, and then Pilate ends up having him flogged, and then the crucifixion, all sort of on the same day. But let's maybe take a look and also see that we don't just have the account from John. I mean, this passion narrative, we're going to see much of the same kind of language in all of the Gospels. So again, this is kind of where it's interesting to, if you get the side-by-side charts, to sort of see what's the timeline here, what's going on. So if we go back to, if we just go to Matthew, let's go to Matthew chapter 26. Here, I'll just do another tab here. Oops. So in Matthew 26, we have Jesus being anointed. Judas is going to betray Jesus, the Passover with the disciples. And so we get a clue here. Would somebody read for us verses 17 through 20? Well, just read 17 through 19.
Now, on the first day of unleavened bread, the disciples came to Jesus, saying, "Where will you have us prepare for you to eat the Passover?" He said, "Go into the city to a certain man and say to him, 'The teacher says, my time is at hand. I will keep the Passover at your house with my disciples.' And the disciples did as Jesus directed them, and they prepared the Passover."
Okay, so what are some of our clues here?
First day of the unleavened bread.
Okay, first day of the unleavened bread. Do we remember about the different days? This is where Paul, you're going to be some helpful to us in sort of the background here. The days of the unleavened bread. What would be the first day of unleavened bread? Oh,
I think it's the 14th of Nisan.
So I think it is as well. And so like that's just a pretty specific deal. So Passover would be 15 Nisan, correct?
Yes.
And
Yeah.
and for 7 days you were to have unleavened bread. And so this is saying on the first day of unleavened bread. So I'm even wondering if like, I don't know enough background here on this. When is the first day of unleavened bread? I'm just doing a Google search for what is the first day of unleavened bread. Here we go. Let's take a look. Here we go. On the 14th day of the first month at twilight is Yahweh's Passover. And on the 15th day of the same month is the Feast of Unleavened Bread to Yahweh. On the first day.
I think one of the things that we don't realize as 21st century people is people had to actually look at the phase of the moon to decide when the month began.
Okay, interesting.
And if you got a rainy and or cloudy couple of days, that it was difficult to figure that out.
Whew. Okay. Well, so, well, regardless, Matthew gives us this clue of timeline stuff, and this is where these things are just kind of interesting. So we get a clue from Matthew on the first day of the unleavened bread. Disciples come to Jesus. Where are we going to, prepare and eat the Passover? And so, so now we have the institution of the Lord's Supper. We have that Jesus is going to be betrayed by Judas. The Passover meal, and then I like this. I like to mention this, and Mark Carlberg likes me to mention this as well. So he gives them the cup as well, and after the cup, then Matthew then says, "And when they had sung a hymn," that's what ended their time of communion together. And so immediately following, Matthew records they sing a hymn.
Yeah, you don't really do a Seder without a certain amount of Hebrew music.
Okay, very good. So so we have the hymn, and then they go out to the Mount of Olives. Same thing as what John said, but John just gave us a much more intimate look as to what all was going on during this time. But we see the same thing. Then we see Jesus praying in Gethsemane. And we know the story of him praying and the disciples taking naps. And then we have his betrayal and arrest while he was still speaking. So he's talking with his disciples. So this, again, seems to suggest it's all happening right one after another. Judas came, and then those who had seized Jesus led him to Caiaphas, the high priest. Where have we heard that before? It's the same thing as John says. Peter following in the distance, Peter's denial, and then and he began to invoke a curse on himself and to swear, "I do not know the man." And immediately the rooster crowed. So that's kind of our clue here. The rooster crowing is okay. the sun has started to come out. The roosters crowed, and so Peter goes away weeping. Jesus is delivered to Pilate. Judas hangs himself. He's before Pilate still, getting questioned in the crowd, and then Pilate gives him over to be crucified, and he's crucified. Again, all seems to sort of happen the same day. So a lot took place from sunrise until Jesus is crucified, and so that gives pause to some. But you can see here again, now from the 6th hour, there was darkness over all the land. So when would the 6th hour be again? Does anybody remember?
12 o'clock, noon.
Yep, 12 o'clock noon. So he's at least been placed on the cross, according to Matthew, before noon. So a lot has gone on, and there was darkness on the land until the 9th hour, and then that's when he gives up his spirit. The curtains torn. I love this line here by the centurion. Truly, this was the Son of God. And when it was evening, really before the sunset, Joseph of Arimathea asked for the body, and it's placed in the tomb. So fascinating stuff to see. Really, similar language. Now we're going to move over to let's go to Luke. I'm going to go to Bible Gateway. And if we go to Luke 19. So Luke 19, Jesus is with Zacchaeus. Anybody remember where that occurred? In Jericho. So Jesus was in Jericho, and they've got to walk all the way up to Jerusalem. Did I share the YouTube video link with you on that walk up the ascent of Adumim and walking from Jericho to Jerusalem? I think I sent an email. Ross and Cindy, you guys didn't get an email from me last week? Okay, well, I will try and resend it, but there is Robin didn't get it either. Okay, well, maybe I'll just send it to you each individually to make sure I get it to you all. But there's a great video that basically you get to go on the journey walking from Jericho to Jerusalem. And they do a really good job of explaining the topography and the layout and how it all goes. Jesus teaching, here's his triumphal entry. We've already gone over that. Jesus weeping over Jerusalem, cleansing the temple. So really we need to go to the next chapters here. So this is all his teaching that we looked at last week, a number of the teaching that Jesus did in Jerusalem. He foretells the destruction of the temple and the fig tree lesson. Let's see here. Let's keep going. Okay, here we go. So we have this plot to kill Jesus. It says the Feast of Unleavened Bread drew near, which is called the Passover. And the chief priests and the scribes were seeking how to put him to death, for they feared the people. Satan enters Judas. Then came the day of unleavened bread, on which the Passover lamb had to be sacrificed. So Luke intentionally places the story on the same day that he makes mention of on which the Passover lamb had to be sacrificed. So that's kind of an interesting way Luke takes his material and he used the timeline to make a point there. So this again is one of these areas where we look at and we say, well, did this have to occur on this day? Well, not necessarily, because Luke was trying to make a point, and the point is very clear that Jesus is the Passover lamb, and so he was sacrificed on the day that the sacrificial lambs are sacrificed. So there's some discussion about all that as well, whether or not it was actually that day or if Luke was just using it. So Jesus goes and sends Peter and John to go and prepare the Passover. They then go into the city. We get more details about the guest room. And then we have when the hour came, he reclined at the table with the apostles with him. And then he talks about how much he desired. This is one of these passages, if you're ever sharing communion with somebody, maybe a homebound member, and this is one of these passages I love to go to because Jesus says, I've earnestly desired to eat this Passover with you before I suffer. And one of the things that I like to try and remind myself is just how much Jesus wants to share this meal with me. That's a side note, I know, but I really like that verse 15 here. It's just a wonderful reminder that Jesus loves being with us and communing with us and sharing of his body and blood with us. So we have the whole story of the Lord's Supper, the institution, and they're trying to figure out who's going to be the one who betrays Jesus. Who's the greatest? They have a conversation there. Jesus talks about Peter's denial. Scripture, all the scripture had to be fulfilled. That was really an emphasis in Luke, is the fulfilling of the scriptures as well. And then Jesus goes to pray. His betrayal and arrest. Again, we see these little clues of perhaps, again, while he was still speaking, he came out and went right. We just don't know the timing, but it seems as if this is all happening just one right after the other. Peter's denial of Jesus, and now this is a really fascinating thing. Look at this. Peter said to him, "Man, I do not know who you're talking about." And immediately while he was still speaking, the rooster crowed, and the Lord turned and looked at Peter. What a you know how you do something, or there's been times I remember as a kid, I did something I knew I shouldn't have done, and then my mom looked at me with that look. I just can't imagine what that look would have been like, and just how much at that moment Peter's guilt, because right after this, Luke says, and Peter remembered the saying of the Lord, how he said to him, before the rooster crows today, you will deny me 3 times. And he went out and wept bitterly. I mean, whew, that is but again, there is this timeline here before the rooster crows today. So we get the sense that all this took place in the night, and now we're to the morning. In the morning, we have Jesus being mocked. We have Jesus before, when day came, right? Jesus is before the council. You weren't supposed to be able to have the council during the darkness. It had to be during the day. So that's kind of interesting. And then the next, we have Jesus before Pilate. Then here's where Luke tells us that Jesus also is sent before Herod. And as we've been going through the Gospel according to Mark, we saw Herod on the scene and his thoughts of who Jesus was. And isn't it interesting, when Herod saw Jesus, he was very glad, for he had long desired to see him because he had heard about him, and he was hoping to see some sign done by him. So Herod, it's just kind of interesting, had not only heard about Jesus, but he really wanted to see Jesus in action. And but he doesn't do anything there, and Herod and his soldiers treat him with contempt and mock him. And then look at this. And Herod and Pilate became friends with each other that very day, for before this, they had been at enmity with each other. And so Pilate was probably very smart to sort of honor Herod by giving Herod the rights, but really Pilate was just trying to get out of having to make a decision here, right? But they became friends that very day. Kind of interesting stuff. And then now Pilate ends up back. And so Pilate says, look, I'm just going to punish him and send him out. But the people wanted him crucified. And so he is crucified. Same stories. John, I feel like, gave us the most, but we still get quite a bit from the others as well. Again, we see the death of Jesus about the 6th hour. There was darkness over the whole until the 9th hour. So he's at least on the cross from the 6th hour to the 9th hour. So noon to 3. A lot of stuff happened in the morning. So that's where some of that discussion comes about, was there enough time on the morning that Jesus was crucified, or was he actually crucified a day later? So I'm just letting you know there's some controversy there in that term. Let's go to Mark, and let's take a look at what Mark says, and we're going to go to let's go to Mark 14. We want to see the same language here. Oh my goodness. I wish we had like 4 hours every Wednesday to do this, but I'm trying to fly through this stuff here, and I just wish we had more time. But Mark 14, we'll see the same stuff. The plot to kill Jesus. Jesus is anointed. Judas is going to betray him. We have the Passover. Again, we see this on the first day of unleavened bread. So that's probably a marker we want to take a look at. And then Mark also says when they sacrifice the Passover lamb. So that then actually gives us maybe more clue, Paul, than the other, because it says on the first day of unleavened bread, when they sacrifice the Passover lamb. So the Passover lamb would have been sacrificed the day before Nisan 15. So this would suggest to me that this is happening on Nisan 14. Would you?
There's Jewish writings that say, how the priests normally were in cohorts, and went up to Jerusalem for like 2 weeks at a time. Mm-hmm. But because of all the thousands of lambs that needed to be sacrificed in a 24-hour period, there was no cohort. All priests who were healthy enough to do so went up to Jerusalem to participate in that.
Oh, fascinating. That's pretty cool. Yeah, I mean, kind of an all hands on deck. This is the Super Bowl of the Jewish priests here, right? Mm-hmm. So where are you going to go? And the disciples found it just as he had told them. I love that. It's always just as Jesus says. And they prepared the Passover. This is kind of interesting. So remember in one of the accounts, I can't remember which one, but some of the disciples, maybe it was John, they were trying to figure out what Jesus meant when he said to Judas, go, what you're about to go do quickly. Mm-hmm. And some of them thought, oh, he must need to go and get some more stuff for the Passover. I find that interesting because here it says that they had prepared the Passover. So I'm not quite certain I understand fully why the disciples were thinking that maybe Judas had to go and get some more stuff for the Passover meal.
Since it lasts 7 to 8 days, you're not going to have everything in terms of food bought before it starts. Okay. In the middle of the Passover week, the do not work things do not apply, because you need to pick up more stuff and prepare more food.
Okay, very good. This is why it's so good to have you with us, Paul. Oh, man. And so then here again, it says, and when it was evening, he came with the 12. So the dinner is at the evening. And as they were eating, he took bread. Jesus foretells Peter's denial. Peter's confident he's not going to do it, but he does it. Let's see here. They're praying in the Garden of Gethsemane. So this is, again, back on the other side of the Kidron Valley there. Then we have the betrayal and arrest of Jesus. It again says immediately while he was still speaking We've seen that same language in all of these. So it's just this continual movement through the day, really through the night. And this is my favorite little passage in Mark's account of what happened. Jesus said to them, "Have you come out as against a robber with swords and clubs to capture me? Day after day I was with you in the temple teaching, and you did not seize me, but let the scriptures be fulfilled." And they all left him and fled. And a young man followed him with nothing but a linen cloth about his body. And they seized him, but he left the linen cloth and ran away naked. And I just find it funny that Mark includes this. He's the only one to include this little line about this guy who ends up streaking, going on a streaker incident. And I would argue, and many people believe, that this young man was actually Mark. So he's writing this about himself, but he disguised it a little bit by saying, "and a young man." So we don't know for certain who this was, but I think it was Mark going on a little streaking adventure that night. It says, and then they led Jesus to the high priest. He's the priests and the elders and the scribes came together. So this would have been now the chief priests and the whole council were seeking testimony against Jesus. This is an illegal meeting of the council. They cannot have court, and they can't make judgments and have a trial during the night. They had to do that during the day, I believe. But here they are.
That's correct. The rabbis teach that shows that the gospel's a fiction, because they would never have violated the prohibition against meeting at night.
So that's kind of interesting. Then we have Peter's denial. Again, the rooster crows. It does sort of signify, I mean, Jesus has said before the rooster crows, and then we have all this stuff happening, and then the rooster crows. So it seems as if the writers are giving us some clues into this is all taking place the same night. And then in the morning, the same stuff again. Jesus is delivered to Pilate. Somewhere in there, he lets him get over to Herod. Mark doesn't mention that. I think only Luke mentions that. But then Pilate delivers Jesus to be crucified. He's mocked. He's put royal clothing on him, the purple cloak, and then he is crucified and taken out to the place called Golgotha. And then here we go. And when the 6th hour had come, there was darkness over the whole land. I wonder if Mark actually tells us when he was put on the cross. Here we go. Yep. So, and it was the 3rd hour when they crucified him. So Mark suggests that Jesus he would suggest that there was this illegal trial basically in the nighttime, and then in the morning you would have had Jesus going before Pilate and Herod all before 9 a.m. And then at 9 a.m. Jesus would have been crucified. It's interesting if you look throughout Mark to see how he marks time and how he goes from as he narrows down, he also then uses the time to really slow down. And so he's talked about days, and now he's talked about the hour, the 3rd hour, and then like he's like slows down the time with which he's writing. Kind of a really fascinating thing to take a look at. And you have the death again at the 9th hour here, and again that centurion. What a great statement! Truly, this man was the Son of God. And that's this is a little preview since we're going through the Gospel according to Mark. At the end of Mark, in Mark 15:39, I mean, this statement, Mark has been trying to get his reader to say this the whole time through the Gospel. And here now at the very end, you have a centurion, a Roman centurion, who's the one who makes the statement, truly this man was the Son of God. And what a great profession there. Again, the burial evening had come. Since it was the day of preparation, that is the day before the Sabbath, Joseph and Arimathea, they had to finish, they had to get him off the cross and buried before Sabbath. And so that's another little marker for us there. Okay, I'm going to give everybody some homework. And this will be a little bit of fun. Your homework for next week is I'd like for you to investigate, maybe do some Google searches on which day was Jesus crucified on. And let's kind of come back and let's share what we learned and what we, and I'd love for you to even give a preliminary guess or theory or hypothesis as to which day you think. And then we'll talk about that a little bit. So that's going to conclude our discussion for today. But are there any questions or any other further things before we sign off here?
I had a question when they asked what happened, where was Judas going to give money to the poor? Was that typical to give money to the poor for Passover?
Yeah, so I think this is a high holy time, and so there is the influx of all these people, and so if you were someone in need, as times of where people are feeling more religious, it's the same kind of deal with you don't see the guys doing the Salvation Army buckets in like June. You see them doing it just before Christmas, right? When everybody's in a little bit more generous attitude, and so you see them out ringing the bell. So this would be, that would be kind of a similar practice.
Okay, thank you.
It's still a custom for most Jewish holidays. Originally, you were supposed to send food, but you can send money instead.
So, well, very good question. We'll have some fun next week, and next week is Holy Week, and so it'll be fun kind of discussing what we think the days were. All right, and I will try and send out an email to each of you directly so I can try and make sure you get it. I sent it out through our little email system, so I'm sorry that didn't work, but I will try and send out the link with that I sent out last time, or that I tried to send out last time. But all right, everybody, have a great day.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you.
See you all.
Yeah.